Imagine a poison that never dies. It doesn't break down in the sun, it doesn't degrade in the soil, and once it enters your body, it has nowhere to go. For decades, thousands of families across northwest Georgia and Alabama woke up every morning, filled their coffee pots, and bathed their children in water they believed was safe. They had no idea that they were the unsuspecting test subjects in a massive, uncontrolled chemical experiment. We are talking about a contamination crisis so severe that the chemicals involved are now found in the blood of nearly every human being on the planet. But for the people of this region, the levels are catastrophically higher. This is not just a story about industrial waste. It is a story about the carpet capital of the world and the toxic secret that helped build it. To understand how this happened, you have to look at the floors beneath our feet. For years, the carpet industry was the economic heartbeat of Dalton, Georgia. It provided jobs, stability, and a sense of pride. The secret to their success was a miracle of modern chemistry. PFAS, these forever chemicals, were the magic ingredient that made carpets resistant to stains, water, and wear. They were applied to millions of yards of carpet, treated in dye houses, and celebrated as a triumph of manufacturing. But there was a dark side to this miracle. The very chemical structure that made PFAS so durable on your rug, that unbreakable bond between carbon and fluorine, exactly what makes it a nightmare for the environment. It simply does not go away. For decades, the wastewater from these carpet factories, millions of gallons of it needed somewhere to go. The solution was a process known as the land application system. It sounds benign, almost eco-friendly. The idea was to spray the treated wastewater over thousands of acres of forest and land, relying on the earth itself to act as a natural filter. It was a system designed for biodegradable waste. But PFAS is not biodegradable. Instead of filtering out the toxins, the soil became saturated. The land turned into a sponge for poison, and eventually, that sponge began to leak. The chemicals bypassed the soil's filtration, seeping into the groundwater, draining into local creeks, and flowing directly into the Conasauga River. This river wasn't just a drainage ditch. It was the lifeline for communities downstream. As the water flowed west, it carried an invisible cargo of toxicity into the homes of hundreds of thousands of people. In places like Gadsden, Alabama, 100 miles away, residents were unknowingly consuming these chemicals for years, and the consequences were personal. We're seeing young adults, people in their early 30s, like the residents featured in recent investigations, being diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, conditions usually reserved for the elderly or heavy drinkers. We see business owners like Dolly Baker, a hair salon owner, finding out that the level of PFAS in her blood was astronomically high, coincidentally suffering from the very thyroid issues linked to these toxins. The biological reality of what these chemicals do to the human body is terrifying. When you drink water laced with PFAS, the chemicals enter your bloodstream and look for a protein called albumin. This is the protein your body uses to transport nutrients and hormones. The PFAS binds to it tight. Because it hitches a ride on this essential protein, your kidneys don't filter it out. It stays there, circulating, accumulating, building up year after year, and the medical community is currently helpless to stop it. There is no pill you can take, no procedure you can undergo to scrub these chemicals from your blood once they are there. Perhaps the most infuriating part of this tragedy is that it wasn't an accident, it was a calculated risk. The investigation reveals that the chemical giants who manufactured PFAS, companies like 3M and DuPont, knew about the dangers long before the public did. Internal documents dating back to the 1950s and 60s show that these companies were aware the chemicals were toxic animal species and persisted in the environment. By the late 90s, warnings were quietly passed to carpet manufacturers like Shaw and Mohawk. They were told that the chemicals in products like Scotchgard could accumulate in the human body. The reaction was not a public warning, but a pivot. While some formulations were phased out, the industry simply switched to alternative PFAS compounds, assuring themselves and the public that these new versions were safe and compliant. But compliant is a tricky word when the regulations are decades behind the science. For years, wastewater from dye houses flowed openly, and the industry operated in a regulatory grey area. It wasn't that they were breaking the laws of the time, it was that the laws hadn't been written yet to catch them. This brings us to the failure of accountability. The Environmental Protection Agency, the body tasked with keeping our water safe, has been fighting with one hand tied behind its back. For a long time, the legal framework placed the burden on the EPA to prove a chemical was harmful before they could regulate it, a process that takes years of litigation and research. While the EPA has finally moved to set strict drinking water limits for some PFAS compounds in 2024, the timeline for compliance is agonizingly slow. Utility companies have been given until 2031 to fully meet these new standards. That is 5 more years of uncertainty for families who are already sick. The response on the ground has been a mix of frustration and resignation. In Gadsden, lawsuits led to a confidential settlement in 2022, funding new filtration technology. But even in 2025, tests showed the water still contained more than twice the recommended levels of key PFAS compounds. Residents are left asking why they are the ones paying the price physically and financially for an industrial byproduct they never asked for. Meanwhile, the political machine churns on. In Georgia, state legislators have attempted to introduce bills that would limit lawsuits against the carpet industry. The argument is always the same. We must protect jobs. The narrative pits the livelihood of the worker against the health of the worker, creating a false choice where the only winner is the corporation. It is a failure of leadership at every level, from the local utility boards who manage the spray fields to the federal agencies that moved too slow. This is an ultra-marathon of a crisis. Cleaning up the forever chemicals will take forever. It requires immense resources, new technology, and a level of transparency that has been completely absent for the last 50 years. For the residents of Georgia and Alabama, the carpet industry left a legacy, but it wasn't just the rugs on their floors. It was the poison in their blood, a toxic inheritance that will impact their health for generations to come. The question now isn't just how we clean it up, but how we hold the architects of this disaster accountable before the clock runs out for the victims.